What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT network. I'm your host, Mundungus Creevy, along with my co-hosts, as always, Cameron Parker, Glenn Hauser, and Gage Madrid. And we have a very special guest for you today. She used to be on the show, and then she left for greener pastures. She is part of the Mile High Sports family. She hosts the LTB podcast, also the Fan Cave, 98.1 if you're local there in Denver. She steals souls, and she's one of our best friends. Bri Maestas, everybody. What's up, Bri? How we doing?
Greener pastures, however you may refer to it. I'm happy to be back. Finally, I have Cameron Parker to thank for that. He was able to reach out, get me booked on the show. Imagine that. My former co-host, and Cameron is the one to reach out first after all the hell I've given him the past couple of years. I really appreciate it.
Wow.
I'm the real MVP. That's what she's saying. I'm the real MVP.
They have been alluding to it, but yeah, we'll put it out there, Cameron. You the real MVP. I appreciate you all, though. Happy to be here.
All right, great show. That's going to end it for us. What's up, Avatar? What's up, Bill? What's up, D-Rock? How's everybody doing? Now, I do have
welcome in, everyone.
Some interesting news before we get going. The MHRT network is now officially monetized. Woo! Way to go, everybody.
Go.
We did it. So that
is my check in the mail?
Sure. Let me just grab my crayon and fill it out.
Residuals.
So there's some Monopoly money.
So what that means is that if you're on YouTube, down at the bottom right where you put in your comment, there's a little money sign. You can click on that. Send super chats if you would like. No pressure, just if you want to, which means do it. I bet. But getting right down into it, how is everybody doing? It's been a while since we've been on. How you doing?
Awesome. Doing great. Excited to have Bri back.
Yeah, it's going well. We had a great 4th. It was kind of nice to spend the 4th of July with the family. So yeah, and it's always a pleasure to talk sports and Broncos football, of course, with Bri.
Listen, I'm fresh off the injured reserve. I'm ready to talk Broncos. I'm healed up. I'm excited, looking forward to the season. We're only a couple of weeks out from training camp. It's going to be here before we know it. What a great way to start off basically the pod parade here on 5280. So I'm happy to be back.
There we go. So let's start it off with a little bit of a change to the Broncos stadium, I guess. So Greg Penner, Kerry Penner, and Rob Walton will be joined on the Broncos Ring of Fame selection committee by the holdovers Dave Logan and Jim. I'm not even going to try.
Sacamano.
There you go, Sacamano. See, that's what I get for not preparing. And new members Steve Atwater, Mike Shanahan. What do you guys think of this move? And do you think it's going to lead to players that are not currently in the ring to be inducted into the Ring of Fame?
I think it's an interesting question, Mike. I know that this is the second consecutive year that there haven't been inductees to the ring. And then obviously the carryover from the COVID years, 34 members of the Ring of Fame. I believe it was initially arranged in 1984. There's a couple of key players who have yet to make it. Specifically, I want to throw out there DeMarcus Ware, who obviously doesn't and isn't eligible because of the 3 years that he played for the Denver Broncos. You don't have a Super Bowl 50 without him, though. And then also his mentorship with Demaryius Thomas, Von Miller. It just doesn't exist without DeMarcus Ware. Now that he's in the Hall of Fame, it's absolutely absurd to not consider him for the Ring of Fame. I'm hoping they're able to add him, and as the player I previously mentioned in that last sentence there, Demaryius Thomas, eligible in 2025, needs to be the first player inducted when they ramp back up again. I think they should hold off until that season and make him the first player inducted in. Otherwise, you got to change the ropes. It's the most fitting selection in order to make it happen. I also want to throw out one little curveball to you all, and I can't wait to hear your reactions. But Ryan Clady, it's a little weird, and it's a little, offensive line doesn't get a whole lot of run. But I think with 3 All-Pro selections and then 4 Pro bowl appearances, you have to give a little bit of recognition to the Ryan Clady. Had he not had that absolute freak ACL injury and a couple others tacked on there at the end of his career, who's telling what he would have contributed to the Denver Broncos? So those are kind of my three in the running. One's a little bit of a sleeper candidate. How do you guys feel about those ones? Who would you put into the Ring of Fame?
So for me, the Ryan Clady thing screams that you're pandering to your co-host Joey Richards, because that is the jersey he has behind him. But that's fine. That's fine. So, leaving out the fact that he hurt himself playing basketball, but whatever. No, I kid. But I love the Demaryius Thomas. I think that is one that he really shouldn't have to wait. Like under the circumstances, let's fast track that. I, for one, as the old guy in the group, I'm thrilled that we're changing some of the selectors. I feel like there are guys from way back that really deserve consideration. Guys like my all-time favorite player, Steve Watson, as a wide receiver, Riley Odoms, Reuben Carter, Steve Foley, who's the all-time interception leader for the Broncos, is still not in. So hopefully that when they do start ramping these things up and inducting these guys, that they're doing 2 and 3 to just catch up. Ed McCaffrey is not in the Ring of Fame. That's pretty shocking. Wade Phillips not in the Ring of Fame. These are all people that Mike Shanahan just got in like 2 years ago. It's just crazy. So, I'm hoping with some new blood and some new consideration that they do that. I think the explanation on not inducting anyone this year was the celebration of the first Super Bowl championship team, and also the fact that with the renovations, they're going to be kind of changing up how the Ring of Fame, park or layout, whatever that is, considered, how that's going to end up being in order to add some people. So, Joey, thank you for being the first person to throw out some dough there. You didn't have to do that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, first one, and we obviously know the answer to that question.
Do we? Do we?
We do. It's not even close. We do.
It feels pretty objective versus subjective. I don't know.
No.
I gotta be honest, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is coming from a guy who says that Joey Richards looks like about every other random white guy who's walking around, I don't know, the Cherry Creek Mall. So
Okay.
That's usually what he's doing.
But to track us back to the Ring of Fame a little bit here, as the younger Broncos fan who really started watching the team from like 2006 on, there's a couple of names that really pop into my mind. Al Wilson is one of them. He's one of those players that first made me fall in love with the defensive side of the game. And then also Demaryius Thomas, just because of everything that he contributed to this organization. The numbers are there with Demaryius Thomas. Off the field, he's known for his contributions to the Denver community. He's somebody who's synonymous with one of the most successful periods of Broncos football. And ultimately, I feel like if there's one person that we should waive that 3-year rule for and make an exception for and give him the recognition he deserves, it's Demaryius Thomas. But also somebody who I feel like flies under the radar a little bit is Al Wilson. And I did want to give Al Wilson his flowers here.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Bri on the Ryan Clady train. Because I think if you go back and you look at his career, from the tackle perspective, it started out almost identical to what Pat Surtain's career started out, from the cornerback position to the tackle position. Because the moment he stepped on the football field, you could make the argument that he was the best left tackle in football, and you could even make the argument he should have even been Rookie of the Year that year. And then obviously all the awards and stuff that he's been able to, garnish and, throughout his career, it's certainly possible that he deserves that credit. Because even after, you can also make the case that even after he left, the Broncos haven't exactly found that left tackle to even replicate, what has been Clady, even from the right tackle spot as well. So I think that it's definitely considering the DeMarcus Ware. I think for Ware's case, to get in, it's probably because of the fact that John Lynch is in. And so because John Lynch is in, I think there's a little bit more of a higher case of where should be in. And I think given the fact about the 2015 defenses and stuff, it will be interesting to see how they appreciate some of those players, right? Down the line and potentially Ring of Fames. And so to kind of continue that theme a little bit, I will go with Patrick Chiody's co-host, Chris Harris Jr., as one. And I will also continue the theme, and I will also say potentially maybe even Derek Wolfe. I think that Derek Wolfe could also maybe even be a name to watch potentially for the Ring of Fame.
You're just worried he's going to put you in a headlock, Cameron. I think that I would be intimidated by that factor as well. Obviously, speaking about friend of the program, Chris Harris Jr. is an absolute shoo-in. I don't think there's any questions against that. What I will say is time shouldn't have any indication on your impact and impression on an organization. So I'm glad that you brought that up. John Lynch is in. I know it's one more year, but the impact Ware had is considerably you don't win a Super Bowl without him. That is the final line. That's the period.
Well, and I think that there's that fair argument. People certainly gave the flowers to Peyton Manning when he was here. But I think that when you look at the impact that DeMarcus Ware had, he had darn near the exact same type of impact on the defensive side of the ball that Peyton did. And, of course, we all know about the resurrecting career on and off the field that he held for Von Miller and all those other guys that was in that room. So he was a huge staple within that locker room and, of course, on the field. And, who can't forget, of course, that offseason that brought in guys like Aqib Talib and TJ Ward, and Emmanuel Sanders and the fact that, frankly, I don't know if people remember this, but there's also that chance that DeMarcus Ware doesn't become a Denver Bronco, because I think the Broncos were heavily interested in signing Jared Allen, and they were really close to signing Jared Allen. And then I think the moment the Dallas Cowboys severed ties with Ware was the moment the Broncos just did a 180 and pivoted to Ware, and then he ended up becoming a Denver Bronco. So it could have been a lot different had DeMarcus Ware not been a Bronco.
Well, and to mention, or to go along with some of those names you brought up, what about Aqib Talib? Is there a case for him? What about Emmanuel Sanders, TJ Ward? Are we going to see more people from that Super Bowl 50 team going into the Ring of Fame, and who should?
I don't know about Ward, but I'm sorry, Bri, to cut you off. One thing with Talib's monument, they do need to modify it and have a broken necklace hanging from somewhere. Yeah. That would be cool, but I could see him, despite some of the off-field things that he continues to find himself a part of. But, I've even seen CJ Anderson's name as mentioned, but I really do believe that they're going to have to kind of clear up some of these guys from the past first, in order before, you mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. That guy to me should be an automatic in the Ring of Fame also. The fact that he still lives in Denver, still is really favorable on the Broncos. He was such a contributor and such a stud for the team, and he was DT's, partner in crime. So that would be nice if their monuments were next to each other.
My only question is if you're playing catch up here, what's the limit, right? I think the Chargers and the Chiefs have more players individually in their respective honors. Where do you draw the line on accepting people into the Ring of Fame? It starts getting into the word of mouth, household name narrative surrounding these players of who you're inducting into this Ring of Fame, because there's a lot of players who are very near and dear to our hearts, but do they get honored in the 500 section for eternity? It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And when I say catch up, I'm really talking about some of the older guys from the 70s and 80s. And it probably amounts to even just 5 people or so. The Riley Odoms, the Reuben Carters, the Steve Foley, Steve Watson. And that might be it actually from that particular era, late 70s, early 80s. And then you have the McCaffreys of the world, and the Al Wilsons, and then you kind of get going. So it'll be interesting how they do go about it. How many people that they put in, but I really like a fresh perspective, and I like the fact that Jim Sakamoto is still on there, Dave Logan's there. Guys that have some history with the team, and knowledge of a lot of those same players that for me that I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And to expand on just the notion of, oh man, I completely lost my train of thought. I can't believe I just did that.
Well, Glenn, you were mentioning other people who were on that committee. Mike Shanahan, the Denver Broncos' best coach ever, is also on that committee. It'll be nice to see what he brings to the conversation, considering he was such a long tenured coach with the Denver Broncos. So I think that is definitely going to swing where those conversations go.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and kind of keeping with the good news with the Broncos, we've got Javonte Williams, right? So we were all concerned that he might not ever play again, but it looks like the plan is to be cleared for training camp, and he plans on running with violent intentions because he doesn't know any other way. That is super exciting to have him back.
It's exciting, but I will say I'm cautiously optimistic because, and I think that's probably the consistent theme probably for all of us is we're cautiously optimistic after the injury, but I do commend him that he's saying that he's not going to change who he is, because I think that that's one of the biggest questions, coming into, this year, and given his injury that he sustained, is he going to be the exact same player? We'll certainly see if that's the case, because at the moment he hits the field and he's getting the kind of contact, right, that you would expect, does he change the type of running style that we've been accustomed to? I think that's maybe the number one concern. So, but I'm definitely cautiously optimistic. I think it would be nice to say bring another body in the room, maybe that's now or a little bit later in training camp, or even into preseason. But you certainly want to see what you have in the room, and I don't know. I'm still cautiously optimistic though.
Yeah. And just, from a mental perspective, Javonte obviously is going to ingrain it into his mind that he's going to get back to that same physical, nasty runner that can drag bodies 20 plus yards like we saw against the Ravens, But as someone who's dealt with knee issues myself, you won't truly know how your body's going to respond until you hit the field. Once he starts actually getting bodies flying around near his knees, how does he feel comfortable about potentially taking a hit down there? Obviously, he's going to be rocking that brace to start training camp and potentially into the season as well. So there's still a lot of unknown factors with Javonte Williams' injury, in my opinion. And although I feel like it's great that we can sit here and say that he's going to be heavily ramped up to start the season, I just don't feel like that's realistic right now. I feel like it's still going to be Samaje Perine taking the brunt of the carries towards the early part of the season. At this point in time, I do feel like Javonte Williams is probably going to be out there for week 1, but how many touches will he get remains to be seen.
Cameron touched on the idea that we have to temper our expectations for what we're expecting out of Javonte Williams, because obviously it's been a roller coaster of events here, from thinking he would start training camp to being told it would be the PUP list to start the season to initially thinking he wouldn't be ready until the middle of 2023. So the question mark surrounding here is, 1, how does Javonte Williams feel first and foremost? 2, you wouldn't expect a player to say anything other than I am going to return to form. 1, right. Their contracts are based upon that. And 2, the Denver Broncos have to clear him in order to prevent any further injury. We had this conversation on a podcast that won't be named because I don't believe in self-promotion right now. But what I will say is that you are anticipating the best move to be made for all parties involved. Samaje Perine is a particularly respectable and serviceable running back 2. I don't believe there's a competition for running back 1. But if the Denver Broncos have specifically built their offense to be able to put run first, run heavy, run often into their system, I think you are really planning it around the return of Javonte Williams. So yeah, I think you have to have tempered expectations, because the start of the season is going to have massive implications for not only the trajectory of the season, Russell Wilson, Sean Payton, and the list begins to snowball from there.
I feel like I heard this on Let's Talk Broncos, but anyway, I digress.
What? I was just going to say that, and the thing is too, like, we've only ever seen it like in rare cases where a back has come back from a very scary injury and he's performed at an exceptionally high level. And I'm referencing Adrian Peterson. Like, there's no way that, you can certainly expect or Javonte Williams to come back and be like the Adrian Peterson recovery, or take the super soldier serum, if you will, and be like just darn near unstoppable. So it's hard to predict that, and so yeah, go ahead, Bri.
Well, there was ACL for Adrian Peterson, but with Javonte Williams, it's multiple ligaments. But what the Twitter experts, and I'm waving a pen around because I'm taking notes, but the Twitter experts were very quick to say we're never going to see Javonte Williams play running back again. That's how dreadful the initial analysis was. And then come to find out the significant damage to the actual components of the knee was a lot less than what the worst case scenario could have been. So a lot of the hype up of, well, it's a timeline, he'll only be 60% of what the athlete he was before, he'll never return to form. A lot of those can't be answered, but a lot of those worst case scenarios are never going to be 100% correct. So Adrian Peterson's timeline was absolutely miraculous. Seeing Javonte Williams even during minicamp was is a sight for sore eyes, specifically because the Denver Broncos have been nothing but bitten by the injury bug. So I'm going to take a little bit of a good news, and maybe he loses a step. Maybe he is not cutting it up as aggressively or with violence as he tends to do. But there's something to be said of hope and momentum and all of that. And if it leads to any sort of spark for the Denver Broncos offense, I'm in on it. I need something to root for.
And I feel like we also have to kind of take a look at the recent history with multi-ligament knee injuries. Obviously, no two injuries are the same here, but obviously we had Saquon Barkley in 2020. It took him really 2 years before we had that burst and explosiveness in his game back. Then last year with the Baltimore Ravens, they had two running backs come off of multi-ligament knee injuries in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. And both of them really struggled to get back to form last season. So I feel like we kind of have to look towards that mold of somebody like Saquon Barkley or the two Ravens running backs in terms of expectations for Javonte Williams coming out of the gate. But maybe as the season goes on, as he gets more and more comfortable with his knee and trusting what type of movements he can and can't make with it, then we can start maybe ramping up the expectations for Javonte Williams as we get closer to, say, week 8, week 9, somewhere around those lines.
Yeah, and you can't underestimate what his progress and his attitude and his work it means to the team as a whole. They're seeing this guy being hungry, coming back from this devastating injury, not only just doing his recovery, but he's doing all these community events. He's had multiple things for his foundation. He's now doing the camps. This guy is a real leader. And what is he, 24 years old? And, just to know that we're going to have Javonte and we're excited. I can't imagine what the team and the coaches feel.
Yeah. I was just going to say, one of the things I was going to say too is we mentioned about, with the injury of Javonte Williams and just, how much of and you mentioned, Bri, about him being a breath of fresh air just in minicamp and just seeing him there, and given the injury history, and then you mentioning about just how much it lifts the room, Glenn. I can't help but think of what it does for, say, a guy like a KJ Hamler, a guy that has sustained some of these injuries over the years, and how much that gives him the kind of confidence to see Javonte Williams come back potentially this quick and maybe even heal this faster. So is there something that Javonte has been doing that maybe KJ can glean from? And granted, we're not actually in game or game time or anything like that, but still, the more you can use that kind of accountability with one another, I think is a big deal. So it definitely does lift the team when you see something like that of a guy recover about as fast as Javonte is.
Yeah, and Bri, we've had this conversation before on this show, and it's been around Broncos country as well, but there are still free agent running backs out there. Are you thinking Denver wants to bring in any more just in case Javonte goes down again, or do you think they're happy where they're at?
I mean, there has been conversation. It's been nonstop about why is it not Dalvin Cook? He's obviously got offers and isn't happy with any of them. What a stark reminder on the careers of running backs being shorter than anticipated. So when you talk about the age of Javonte Williams, how much longer does he actually have in a career that is running directly at a very big defensive line? So the question is it Dalvin Cook? Is it, I believe they brought on Tony Jones. I don't want to be misled there, but somebody threw out Zeke Elliott. No, I'm not a fan of it. I think that you can find cheaper, serviceable talent elsewhere without taking on the contract of someone who's really not living up to what their expectations or ceiling were presently had. So to me, I don't know what's in Sean Payton's head. He continues to make some choices that really just surprise me, to put it nicely. But for the Denver Broncos, I think running back is a concern, but it really is showing you if they're not making moves right now to fill that void, that they pretty much have a good idea of where Williams is in his recovery. Time will tell, and there's always time to pick somebody up. I don't have anybody on my list particularly that I would want to bring in, although I believe Leonard Fournette is still out there, and as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers former fan, I'd say do it. Why not do it? So
So speaking of,
I mean, Tom Brady retired, so it's fine.
Speaking of running backs, maybe today's news actually will have some impact on who's the first domino to fall of these guys that Bri just mentioned. With Alvin Kamara taking a plea deal, now the league is set to give out some sort of a punishment. And I was listening to Albright and Dave Logan talking, and Albright thinks that he's probably going to get 2 games, and Dave thinks it's going to be a minimum 4, perhaps 6. So if Dave is right, they're going to really need a top-notch running back, and I think they're going to go hard after one of these guys that Bri was just talking about.
They do have Jamal Williams down there, though.
Yeah.
Right, but I think that you would probably want maybe a similar-ish back to bear probably to complement what the loss of Alvin Kamara is, and so maybe that's going to be your Dalvin Cook, and that's obviously like if Dalvin Cook doesn't sign with maybe Miami, that's been like the lingering spot for him, but yeah, I don't. It's definitely a continuing conversation to be had. I think the other point is that because of the fact that they've not made any additions to the room, also probably tells us they feel pretty good about the prospects of the other people in that room, meaning Samaje Perine, Tyler Beatty, Jaleel McLaughlin, some of those other guys, they probably feel pretty comfortable with them. We mentioned it before, McLaughlin's and Beatty are probably 2 guys you probably do want to keep an eye on.
If you're a free agent running back, are you eyeing the Denver Broncos or are you eyeing the Buffalo Bills, who now also have an opening for that position? It's just an interesting concept of free agency of who is actually in contention. I'd say the Miami Dolphins are also in better contention than the Denver Broncos as it presently sits. We'll know eventually, but I'm a little down on the team right now. So my visor is a little bit pointed downward.
Yeah.
Personally, if I were a free agent running back, I'd choose the Bills.
You've never worn a visor in your life. Come on.
But if the Bills can figure out their run game, man, then that is ultimately the move. I feel like that will put them over the hump. That was one of the most disappointing aspects of their overall offensive production last year, in my opinion, and they were too predicated on Josh Allen playing hero ball, especially towards the end of that season. So I personally feel like if I'm a free agent running back, I'd be more attracted to somebody like the Buffalo Bills. But to go on Cam's point, I'm glad he brought up Tyler Beatty and Jaleel McLaughlin, because those are 2 guys that I feel very strongly about one of them emerging into a big role on this offense, because what the Broncos really need is a speedy, explosive, change of pace running back. I've talked about this on my show quite a bit. What we really are looking for is somebody who can rip off a big, explosive 75-yard run at any given time. And right now, I'm not sure that our top personnel in the backfield can do that. So if somebody like Tyler Beatty, who we've seen make explosive plays for the Broncos in our season finale against the Chargers, or somebody like Jaleel McLaughlin, who made a lot of explosive plays in college with big burst and acceleration, then I feel like those are 2 guys we need to keep an eye on in the Broncos backfield to carve out a role for themselves.
Yeah, and if you haven't looked at McLaughlin's highlight reel, do it, because I can't remember a guy that had a burst like him. I mean, it is insane. I'm excited to see this dude come preseason for sure.
And
And
we're
he
also
can-
discounting the importance of the fullback position. So if that's going to be integrated as well, maybe there's not a reason to stretch it out so thin. So there's a lot of interesting movements. That's what I'm really looking forward to training camp and preseason to really see how it unfolds, because right now it's a blueprint without much of a plan.
So to kind of go off of the roster talk we've been talking about before we go into Sean Payton, ESPN ranked all 32 NFL teams by rosters, and Denver was 13th. So the teams you previously talked about as far as running backs go, Bills and Dolphins go 3 and 4. You've got the Cowboys up there, the Chargers at 7, the Browns at 9, which I don't get.
No.
The Jets at 10. You got the Seahawks at 12. And then
Guys,
you got Denver.
Guys, last year, I think it was PFF had them at 14. So the fact that the Denver Broncos didn't fall to the bottom of the 2/3, the bottom third of the league in their ranking is kind of miraculous, because we've seen how this team came together, and it was the lengths and methods in which weren't great, right? So 8 seasons of new owners, new QBs, new coaching, new systems. The process has been wild, and I don't know, rot with drama. So I was shocked to see them at 13 on the rankings list, because rot. Have you not? Do you want me to look that up for you and send you a Google definition, Mike? Are you good?
We could, quite honestly, we can spell it the right way and the wrong way.
Oh, I was trying to take this seriously, but it's fine. We'll go with your direction. What I want to talk about, though, is that the fact that the roster is ranked that high, and I don't disagree here. It's the idea that the wins and loss column does not hold up snuff to this opportunity. You've still got a lot of young talent here. The production should be there. It still has a lot of bright spots. I know there's a couple of positions and there's some hot spots, but I know that drafting Marvin Mims, getting Tim Patrick back, a promise of consistency from Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton and KJ Hamler both coming to that point in which they should be fully recovered from their injuries. That wide receiver room is really promising. You've got a pass rush indication there where Randy Gregory is your X factor. I think that's a really could go positive, could go negative. It's all about availability there. But I think the most talented rosters can just quickly see their season go into the gray, into the red. So here with the Denver Broncos, I think they're poised and ready. What I do have concerns with is what kind of X factor is Russell Wilson in this entirety of it? Does he bring them up, or does he anchor them into the second half of that list? I don't know how I feel right there. I love that Broncos breakdown. I believe that's Bill Wright said lucky 13. I'm a big fan of the number 13 and all the things that come along with it. Could this be the showing where the Broncos are not only just the fun talking point of town, but they actually start to lift themselves up with a Sean Payton, Russell Wilson combination? I want to see it happen.
What do you think? Bri, what do you think is going to happen with Russ? I mean, do you got to? I mean, I think bounce back, but what is your opinion?
It's a wild card to me. I think that what you've seen is more than just a regression because of Nathaniel Hackett. And I know the most popular point of contention is that Nathaniel Hackett didn't know what he was doing. I think that if you hold Russell Wilson to a standard of a potential Hall of Fame quarterback or a Super Bowl winning quarterback, which, mind you, hasn't happened in a while, you're holding someone to a ceiling that I actually think is a little lower or equal to the floor right now. So the regression we've seen from Russell Wilson, the continued injuries, I know he's slimmed down. I don't like to make a whole lot of comments on people's physiques, but I know that should fare relatively well for Russell Wilson. We'll know pretty quickly. I'm not giving a quarterback who's been in the league this long halfway through the season to prove that they're able to play at a serviceable or above serviceable level. That's not what the Denver Broncos need right now, specifically with the young roster that they have right now that puts them at 13 on that ranking list, to be wasted with 2 more seasons, 3 more seasons, God forbid, of mediocrity. And that's what we saw last season. So I'm just hesitant. It's a lot of the time when you're coming up from that subfloor to be able to reach that peak again. If you see it in the first quarter of the game, so we should be judging seasons in quarters after the first couple of games. If it doesn't feel like it's there, throw in Jarrett Stidham and try to see if you have something with him.
So if we see you wearing the Drew Lock Seahawks jersey in week 3, we know that
Listen, you know what
shit's got
happened.
real.
Yeah, it hit the fan.
Just to build on your point there, Bri, there were just a lot of factors with Russell Wilson that I just don't feel like can reasonably be put on Nathaniel Hackett. Lack of downfield accuracy at times. It was inconsistent, especially on outbreaking routes outside the numbers, I felt like is where he really struggled. And historically, Russell Wilson's been a guy who's made hay outside the numbers, outside the hashes. If you look at his passing heat map, all of his best work is done outside the numbers. And last year, it was up and down, up and down, up and down in that particular passing category. Also, self-induced pressure. He was looking like Drew Lock out there at times in terms of bailing from clean pockets, stepping up into defensive linemen, and frankly, at times just not knowing where the pressure was coming from. And that's on the quarterback. Not having a veteran center like we don't have in Lloyd Cushenberry, although Lloyd Cushenberry is very smart and can handle protections. It's on the quarterback to know where your hot read is, where the pressure is coming from, and where you need to elude the pressure in the pocket. And Russ was borderline dog crap at that last year.
Gage, Drew Lock's still catching strays after all these years. Can we talk a little bit about your point, though? The offensive line gets dragged into the mud with their quarterback play. It's not fair, and Cushenberry is more than just an intelligent, high IQ football player. I don't think he's the problem. Specifically, you got to set that entire line. There's a couple of weak points. We all like to scapegoat players, but leave Drew Lock alone.
When Gage was saying up and down, I mean, I can't be the only one that was thinking high knees, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
Broncos country, let's ride.
There it is.
Oh dear Lord.
But I back to the roster though. I do think it's regardless of like where you feel about Russ or where where you think he can be with Sean Payton, I do think it's at the right medium. Because it's like, with where things currently are, with where the roster is. I even think the Jets ranking is rather favorable. Obviously, it's a little bit above Denver, but like the Jets and Denver have been kind of like in that same tier as far as being a quarterback away for, the Jets were very clearly a quarterback away last year, and the Broncos have been a quarterback away. And so I think that it's truly just going to come down to the marriage of what's going to happen with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. I think, thankfully, the fact that there is, and this is just what we've seen in the offseason, that identity with what we've seen of building that running game, building a physicality, something that Russ has been very comfortable with, even dating back to Seattle and in his time in college. We talked about that before. It's just, I think that bringing that kind of comfortability back, for Russ, I think is going to be a big deal. The question's just going to be up to him. Can he really not take the amount of, chances that he did, say, last year? I mean, you could make a case maybe that he was playing hero ball a little bit too much, or feel like he was taking too much of or he wanted to put, too much on himself to make the big play. And I think that at times that very well did hinder him. And so, yeah, you also kind of need to kind of temper I'm a big Russell Wilson fan. I mean, everybody knows that, but you do have to kind of temper your expectations and seems like, and just be like, what are we going to get from him? I mean, and so I think that's why a lot of people are seeing roughly in the 25 to 10 range, roughly, of, the touchdown interception ratio, which isn't bad. I mean, it's not necessarily great per se, but it's good in the sense of what the offense can be. And the question is, what will it be at the end of the season as well? So, but I think it's the right medium with everything that, Bri laid out with the roster, the pass rush, the injury history that they've had. I think it's the right medium with them being like right at that 13.
And so many of us are gluttons for punishment. We don't want to temper the expectations. We just every year we're just, drinking the Kool-Aid and ready to roll. So, but I think that this one actually is a little bit different in the sense that, it's now or never at this point for this grouping of the coach and the quarterback.
Yeah.
You almost feel too like it's possible this is, I mean, the wide receiver room certainly teased it, but it also certainly feel like this is the last rodeo for some of the people within the wide receiver room as well. So it isn't, so it isn't just Russell Wilson too, potentially, of the last rodeo. It's maybe guys like Tim Patrick, maybe guys like KJ Hamler, maybe guys like some of these other guys that maybe move. And the KJ Hamler stuff, maybe after this training camp, who knows? Like, who knows what's going to happen? So it's certainly possible. There's a lot that can happen.
How incumbent and directly related is the wide receiver success to Russell Wilson's success, though? You have Jerry Jeudy coming up on a contract year. You have Tim Patrick coming off of a really terrible injury, and you have two other top-tier targets in the core four that you need relative success from their quarterback in order to see success from them, not to mention whatever the plans are with Dulcich, Manhurts, and any of the receivers that you have out there. So a lot of it is all directly tied into the success from Russell Wilson, and I don't think he's going to be throwing the ball that much. So again, we're then back to the concerns about the running back room. So I don't know. I feel a little insane doing this cyclical conversation of like, what are you looking forward to? Not a whole lot. I'm a little scared. So I
was gonna say maybe your name should be Insanity. Kind of go into a callback from your last show. Maybe it should be Insanity.
That's rude, and I'm blocking you on Twitter.
Ooh. Okay, so let's.
Bree's gonna have 45 texts right after the show from Cam. Please don't.
I'm sorry. Let's move it into the main topic of the show, which I thought was kind of interesting. People are wanting to know, and I don't know who these people are because I just made it up. But
your family.
People want to know, before Sean Payton even coaches a game with the Broncos, where does he rank as far as coaches go in Broncos history?
That is not how it was posed to me. It was, is Sean Payton the greatest Denver Broncos coach to ever be a Denver Broncos coach? And when I read this, I was like, this can't be serious because one, it's Mike Shanahan. I said it earlier in the show, 2 Super Bowls, plus he was the offensive coordinator in 94 during the 49ers run. His intensity, his standards, what he encompassed as a coach, one of a dozen coaches in NFL history with at least 2 Super Bowl wins. Mike Shanahan's the correct answer here, but let's talk a little bit about Sean Payton, right? 8-8 in his first season, 3 consecutive seasons with at least 12 wins. Or I'm sorry, you have to think about, I was reading a different stat line for Mike Shanahan because I wrote like this big novel of love towards him. But with Sean Payton, what you have to consider is the Super Bowl in 2009. I believe he's had 2 wild card losses and 4 divisional round losses since then. Not a whole lot of winning going on in the postseason for Sean Payton. A lot of his stats are akin to another Super Bowl winning coach in Mike McCarthy. But what I'm worried about with Sean Payton is it's been such a long time, 14 years now going on 15 years without a Super Bowl and not the greatest postseason run. I know there's only a couple. There's only a handful of current NFL coaches that have won a Super Bowl. I'm concerned about the expectations that the combination of Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, 2 very unstable individuals, if you put them together, that doesn't mean they increase in stability. It means you increase in volatility. So my question mark here is, he's got to do something. We have to wait until we see how this season shakes out and how long is his term going to be as a Denver Broncos head coach. I know that he had a little bit of a rocky shakeout there with the New Orleans Saints, and then he came back and then he left again. There's not a whole lot of, I'm having commitment issues with this one because I don't think he's ready for that. But also, who's to say in 5 years, we're reflecting back on this conversation and we're like, wow, how wrong we were to doubt Sean Payton and his ability to take this Denver Broncos lowly team, lowly being where they're presently at in my head, and bring them into contention for a Super Bowl. Not winning a Super Bowl, contention. Winning a Super Bowl is difficult. It's not an easy task. What I'm worried about here, though, is that we're propping him up on a pedestal. He's here to save us, which is what we do with Russell Wilson last season. We said our savior has arrived. Well, part due, and I'm a little concerned that he's not the exact answer. Does it mean that it can't be better? No. It just means that it's not there yet, but I appreciate the question. But it's got to be Mike Shanahan, right? Gary Kubiak was pretty great, but I got to go Shanny.
Yeah, there's no doubt between the body of work of Mike Shanahan and also Sean Payton. There are some parallels in terms of reverence and respect that he gets from his locker room that you can draw between Sean Payton and Mike Shanahan. But at the same time, the accomplishments in the career speak for themselves, just like Bri alluded to. And also, Mike Shanahan doesn't have the added baggage of the Bounty Gate scandal. I have to bring that up. That is something that we can't bring up Sean Payton without discussing here. He does have those blemishes on his record. And also, but with Sean Payton, I also feel like there were a lot of outside factors in some of those playoff losses with New Orleans that I don't feel like were exactly on Sean Payton. Minneapolis Miracle was absolutely a choke job.
Yeah.
But I think of that playoff loss in the NFC Championship game to the Rams. New Orleans should have won that game. There's no getting around it. New Orleans was in position to kneel out the clock and win that game. So at the end of the day, or I think they were going to score either way, they were going to win that game had that call not happened. So there are outside factors in some of Sean Payton's lack of success after that Super Bowl run. But at the same time, I look at his 2021 season, his last season in New Orleans. He kept that team one game out of the playoffs with a combination of Ian Book, Jameis Winston until he got injured, Trevor Siemian, and Taysom Hill at quarterback. I feel like there's body of work, even without Drew Brees, that can at least speak to what Sean Payton is capable of. What's up, Bri?
Oh, well, I want to give a little bit of pushback just on the consideration. Football is a game that, however the football bounces, is the outcome of the game. There's been an unending list of the very small margin of wins and losses for teams. If you can talk about it in the positive and or bolster your conversation surrounding Sean Payton, can't you also say a couple of other things could have gone a different direction had it not been for a couple of questionable bounces? So I get that there's been some crazy things that have happened over his tenure, but you took a very long story career with Drew Brees and you really weren't able to make a whole lot happen with it. To me, that's kind of a waste of a career.
Yeah, and I think with Sean Payton, obviously the comparison isn't necessarily the same, but you almost get the sense that he's almost like a Mike Tomlin in that sense. Because I mean, like if you look at it, 11 out of the 15 years, he's had a winning record. There's really only been 4 seasons of a losing record. Now, granted, Mike Tomlin has not had a losing record, so that kind of maybe cancels the entirety of that argument, which is certainly possible.
Pretty much.
Anyway, but I think that the main point is that it's consistency. Like for about 11 of the 15 years, he's had a winning squad. Like, I mean, and even going back to all the times when he's had multiple quarterbacks and stuff like that, he was still able to have a winning record or 500 record. But as far as the greatest coach in Broncos history, if we're to go solely off of name and name only, then maybe, because and even then, if it's name, you're still going to go with Mike Shanahan. But then maybe Sean Payton based off of just name. Then yes, then Sean Payton would be maybe almost in lockstep with Mike Shanahan. But no, it's also far too soon to even be having this conversation, because Sean Payton hasn't even coached a single game yet. He hasn't even coached preseason yet. He hasn't even coached a week 1 game yet against the Raiders. I mean, so, and oh, by the way, not to pour even more cold water, the fact that the Broncos haven't even beaten the Raiders. So, I mean, so I just think that it's just far too soon to be having this conversation. And so if it's something, say 3 years from now, and, you have the same results, say from what a Peyton Manning had, which was, they're in the playoffs all these years and they're going to some AFC championships and they appear in one Super Bowl or whatever. If that's the case, then sure, we're having this argument, but that is way too far down the road and in way too soon to be predicting something that is that ridiculous.
Mike, can you grab the comment from Sports Nonsense and Whiskey? Because I think it's a really interesting concept. We like to talk a lot about what could have happened had something else not happened. And that's just sort of what I want to allude to in this here is Bre's had many years with no defense behind him. And when they finally got a defense, Bre's had no arm strength left. Sometimes it's just how the cookie crumbles. You can't retroactively place those sort of guidelines on a career of a quarterback who wasn't able to achieve much more after that first Super Bowl win. So that's all I'm trying to say. But I do understand as a fan of the sport, you do like to recall the storied careers of a pretty impressive quarterback. So I don't want to downplay that so much, but I wasn't trying to fight Gage when I had that conversation. It was just sometimes there's things that we wish shook out a little bit differently. And Gage, I cut you off again, so go ahead.
No, not at all. I honestly kind of forgot where I was, but just to I love having my points challenged. I love
you have them
getting
running
follow-up questions. That's why I love having my points challenged. That's why I've gotten into this field, is to have these conversations, and each of us are going to have our own different takes. So I absolutely love it.
You're already on a hit list.
So you can look at the topic in different ways, because he hasn't accomplished anything as a Broncos coach. But I mean, it could be argued that Sean Payton is a future Hall of Fame coach. Whether he's in yet or he's well on his way. You don't think so?
He's walking away.
He's gone.
Wow.
Walking away.
To Gage's point, we all have takes. We all have takes. They're not necessarily all good. But Mike Shanahan is a bona fide lock for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in the next year or two, hopefully. Mm-hmm. I saw the comment too about the coaching tree. You can't ignore that. I mean, his two Super Bowl wins, the two for the franchise, for the first for the franchise. It's so much fun watching him mic'd up on the sideline. And when, especially that play when the Rod Smith, he's wide open, he'll be wide open. And, he could see the plays before they were happening. And then the guys that you just see underneath him, and not just his son, but all these other successful coaches. I mean, easily, by far, he's the best coach that we've ever had. Should be already in the Hall of Fame. Right. Hopefully that injustice is fixed in short order. But, and he serves a pretty decent steak.
Yep. I remember what I was going to say. At the end of the day, your legacy, it's results oriented. And Sean Payton has not built his legacy here in Denver yet. He has not put anything out on the field. So we can't fairly sit here and judge, does Sean Payton rank amongst the best coaches in Denver history when we literally have zero sample size? So Mike Shanahan's somebody who built his legacy in the Mile High City and has that bona fide track record to where you can say, okay, there's strong evidence to support that he is the best coach in Denver history. Right now, we literally have no evidence in one direction or the other with Sean Payton. We're not going to have those results until personally a couple of years from now when we really have a large sample size of Sean Payton.
And maybe it's just like a personal feeling that I have, but like since Gary Kubiak, I feel like Sean Payton is probably the best coach to handle the expectations that Broncos country has for the Broncos. Like last year, our expectations were so high for Nathaniel Hackett because he comes in, he's new, he's different, he's an offensive guy. And then we had that shithole of a season, excuse my French. Yeah. But I feel like any other coach that would have come in would have faced the same expectations that Sean Payton is. But I think Sean Payton is going to be the one that's able to handle those expectations the best.
I don't think he's going to care about him, to be honest. You have an opinion, he's not going to want to hear it.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why in this particular season, you've seen how the Broncos have handled it. It's just been tight-lipped, and that's caused us, the podcasters, create a lot of rampant, stuff of like, what are the expectations? Because we don't know. Like, we don't know what it's going to be. And so or at least we, in air quotes, think we know what it's going to be, but like, it's one of those things like you may have an idea, but like, that's just from us. That's not, but I mean, if you get a nice little pulse of the locker room, I'm sure that they are expecting, it to be different because they want it to be different. They want to play differently, with where things have been, since the Gary Kubiak years. But I mean, yeah, it's just been a whole new ball game. And I will say I do like the parallels of, what is it, Sean Payton and Mike Shanahan? Because if I'm not mistaken, didn't they go to the same school, or they went to the same, was it the same college or something? Like Mike Shanahan and
Eastern Illinois.
Eastern Illinois. So like there's parallels there. And, and so like there's a little bit of a connection there, but that's, so there's enough connection there to where, you might see some connections between both of them, say during the season of, maybe even some grabbing a coffee one time and just kind of talking ball one time or something, probably getting some advice or something. But so it's just, I like the parallels of it, but still though, it's a fun conversation to have, certainly when you're trying to create and find ideas. Like, is Sean Payton the greatest head coach in Broncos history? But no.
People are loving this topic, Mike. Good job.
You approved your clickbait correctly.
I did.
Forget about putting my face up on the thumbnail. This is going to generate all sorts of angry clicks.
See, there we go. I did my job.
We could have brought Bri's old avatar back.
Oh yeah.
Then why didn't we?
Next time.
Then why didn't you?
Those
That's
avatars are cool,
awful,
man.
presumptuous to think
it.
that I'm coming back for another episode. But I appreciate you guys very much.
Wow.
Presumptuous is my middle name.
I can't even spell it. I want to thank
Obviously.
everybody for joining us in the show, especially Bri. Great to have you back. Bri, where can people find you on social medias, on podcasts? Where do you want them to look for you?
I changed my handle across the board, so you can now find me just about anywhere. Bri Maestas 303. That's Maestas. You can find me on the Fan Cave 1 to 2 p.m. for Mile High Sports Radio with the Let's Talk Broncos crew, where we talk, you guessed it, Broncos. On Mile High Sports, the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube page, and anywhere you get your podcast. So please go do that. You'll also be able to hear me later this month at an undisclosed location. Information to follow. I can't wait to continue talking Broncos sports and Mile High Sports with all of you because, it's not football season yet. I'm not going to talk baseball. So what am I supposed to do?
There we
Nuggets, maybe?
Go Nuggets. Yeah, you didn't see my shirt. I got my championship shirt hanging.
Shirt.
Oh, we lost you.
And she's gone.
You did.
It wasn't even me. I didn't do it. But again, we appreciate every single person that joined us in the show today. We love having you here. Go Broncos, go Nuggets, go Avalanche. I guess we could say go Rockies, go them too. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, go.